In the world of classic cars, there are stories of success, and then there are tales of what could have been. The Kaiser Darrin is one of those fascinating stories that shows how great ideas sometimes run into difficult realities. Let's explore the complete story of this unique car, from its ambitious beginnings to its eventual end. The story starts with a man named Henry J. Kaiser, who wasn't originally a car maker at all. Kaiser began his career running a cement business in Vancouver, British Columbia. In 1927, he got a contract to build roads in Cuba, and from there, his business empire just kept growing. He helped build massive projects like the Hoover Dam and Grand Coulee Dam. Then, in 1939, even though he had never built a single ship before, Kaiser jumped into the shipbuilding business. By 1943, he had more than 300,000 workers in 7 shipyards. During World War II, his company built an incredible 1,490 Liberty ships to help the war effort. Kaiser was known for solving problems in creative ways. If his workers needed a place to live, he would build entire cities in just months. If he couldn't get enough steel, he would either build his own steel factory or figure out how to use aluminum instead. The one thing Kaiser sometimes couldn't see was his own limitations. In 1942, while World War II was still going on, Kaiser started thinking about making cars. The U.S. government had stopped civilian car production to focus on military vehicles, but Kaiser was already planning for peacetime. He gathered a team he called his Idea Men to design an affordable, lightweight car that regular working people could buy. By 1945, they had built their first prototype, called the K-85. It wasn't the small car they had originally planned, but it had some advanced features like front-wheel drive and a special suspension system they called torsionetic suspension. On July 25, 1945, Kaiser partnered with automotive executive Joseph W. Fraser to create the Kaiser-Fraser Corporation. They leased the Ford factory in Willow Run, Michigan, to build their cars. But making cars turned out to be harder than designing them. Even though people were eager to buy new cars after the war, Kaiser-Fraser struggled to get enough money to keep operating. Kaiser wanted to make more cars, but Fraser thought they should be careful and make fewer. Fraser worried that once big companies like Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors started making their new post-war car designs, Kaiser-Fraser would have trouble competing. This disagreement led to Fraser leaving the company in early 1949. Kaiser's son Edgar took over as president, and they renamed the company Kaiser Motors. Just as Fraser had predicted, sales dropped in 1949. The Kaisers thought about giving up, but decided to try one more time with a new car called the Henry J. This is where Howard Darrin enters the story. Darrin had an impressive background in car design. In 1923, he and another American designer, Thomas L. Hibbard, started a company in Paris called Hibbard and Darrin. They became famous for designing beautiful car bodies for expensive European cars. But when the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, they lost many of their wealthy customers. Hibbard left to work for General Motors under Harley Earl. Darrin stayed in France for a while, working with a wealthy South American banker in a company called Fernandez and Darrin. But by 1937, he had moved back to the United States. Darrin set up his design studio on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood and worked with Packard to create some of their most attractive cars in the 1930s and 40s, including the Packard 120 and Packard Clipper. His designs were known for having a special fender line that curved down the side of the car and dipped near the rear fender. After World War II, Darrin started working with Kaiser-Fraser as a consultant. His first design became the 1947 Fraser, but his relationship with the company was rocky. Darrin often got angry when other designers changed his designs. He quit in 1946 after calling the company's designers orange juicers because they had changed his design for their sedan. Though Henry and Edgar Kaiser liked Darrin personally, they weren't upset to see him go. Darrin had a reputation for being difficult to work with and quick to anger, but the story wasn't over. 2 years later, Darrin came back to work on the 1951 Kaiser. However, when the company chose a different, more conservative design for their Henry J. compact car instead of his design, Darrin quit again. Still believing in the Henry J's potential, Darrin decided to prove his point. Using his own money and without telling Kaiser, he created a sports car design based on the Henry J. By mid-1952, he had finished a clay model and contacted Bill Tritt of Glasspar, a company that had pioneered using fiberglass for car bodies. Tritt made a prototype body which was sent to Darrin's shop in Santa Monica, California, where it was put onto a Henry J chassis. When the car was finished, Darrin invited Henry Kaiser to see it. Kaiser's reaction was exactly what Darrin had expected. He was furious. "We are not in the business of selling sports cars," Kaiser shouted, angry that Darrin had worked on the project without telling him. But Darrin stood his ground, saying he had built the car with his own money and on his own time. He told Kaiser, "If you don't build the car under the Kaiser banner, I'll build it myself." What happened next changed everything. Kaiser's new, younger wife, who had come along to see the car, spoke up. She said, "This is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I don't see why you aren't in the business of building sports cars. I don't think there will be many automobile companies that won't go into the sports car business after seeing this car." Those words completely changed Kaiser's mind. By the end of the visit, he had not only agreed to build the car, but also approved developing a four-door version. To show his appreciation, Kaiser had the sports car named the Kaiser-Darrin. The timing seemed perfect. American car companies were racing to create two-seat roadsters to compete with British sports cars. Ford was working on the Thunderbird, and General Motors was developing the Chevrolet Corvette. Darrin's design had actually come before both of these. The Kaiser-Darrin had several unique features. Most notable were its doors, which didn't swing out like normal car doors. Instead, they slid forward on tracks into the front fender wells behind the front wheels. Darrin had patented this sliding door design in 1946. To keep things simple, the doors didn't have side windows built into them. The car also had a special three-position landau top that could be adjusted in different ways. The body was made of fiberglass, which was a new material for cars at the time. Fiberglass didn't rust or corrode, was lighter than metal, and could be shaped more easily than steel. It was also cheaper to make the molds for fiberglass than the tools needed for shaping steel. The body was made in two main sections, plus separate pieces for the trunk lid, doors, and hood. The car came in four colors: champagne lacquer, white, red sail lacquer, yellow satin lacquer, and pine tint lacquer, green. They had to use lacquer paints because fiberglass couldn't handle the high temperatures needed for baking enamel paint onto it. While Tritt's company Glasspar made the first few bodies, Kaiser ended up making most of the 435 production cars in-house. Glasspar continued to make the trunk lids, top compartment covers, and doors. The prototype was shown to the public in November 1952 at the Los Angeles Motorama, 2 months before General Motors unveiled the Corvette. People loved it, calling it the sports car that everyone has been waiting for. At the 1953 New York Auto Show, Kaiser Motors said the car would be available by fall. However, production models didn't reach showrooms until January 1954. Several problems caused delays. One big issue was finding the right engine. The prototype used the standard Henry J engine, but even Kaiser knew a sports car needed more power. Kaiser engineers had developed a V8 engine, but the company didn't have money to build it. They tried to buy Oldsmobile's 303 cubic inch Rocket V8, but Oldsmobile raised the price during negotiations, making it too expensive. For the production car, Kaiser engineers modified the Henry J engine with an aluminum head, a different camshaft, and 3 carburetors. This added 25 horsepower, but caused problems with valves and pistons and made the car harder to drive. When Kaiser merged with Willis Overland in March 1953 to form Willis Motors Incorporated, they got access to the Willys Hurricane engine. This engine only had 6 more horsepower than the Kaiser engine, but was stronger and worked better with superchargers. However, a labor strike at the Willow Run plant where the engine was made caused more delays. When the Kaiser-Darrin finally went on sale, it cost $3,668, more than a Cadillac 62 or Lincoln Capri. It came with features like a tachometer, electric windshield wipers, tinted windshield, wind wings, and white wall tires. The car could reach 95 miles per hour and go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 15 seconds. This made it faster than the MGTF but slower than cars like the Alfa Romeo Giulietta Spider and Triumph TR2. The car had good and bad points. The sliding doors looked cool but could be troublesome. They sometimes got stuck, and owners had to keep the tracks clean of dirt and debris. The top leaked, and the heater didn't work very well. The steering was light and direct, making the car easy to drive, and the brakes were excellent. The ride was comfortable for a sports car, but it wasn't as sporty as its European competitors. Sales were slow. Kaiser dealers were hesitant to order the cars, and many had either switched to other car makers or gone out of business. People weren't sure about Kaiser's future and didn't want to buy an expensive car from a company that might not be around much longer. In July 1954, Kaiser reduced the wholesale price and offered dealers special deals, including a $700 trade-in allowance for any Darrin. But it wasn't enough. Kaiser had hoped to sell 1,000 cars per year, but they hadn't even made half that many. The factory where they built the Darrin was running out of space because of unsold cars, and their lease was about to expire. Then disaster struck. A freak snowstorm hit Toledo in the winter of 1953 to 54, and 50 Darrins stored at the Kaiser Willys plant were buried in snow for months. When they were finally dug out, their fiberglass bodies were too damaged to sell as new cars. Kaiser wanted to scrap them, but Darrin stepped in. Since he still owned the rights to the car's design, Kaiser offered him the cars for a very low price. Production stopped in August 1954. Darrin bought the damaged cars and all the remaining ones in Kaiser's storage and sold them from his Hollywood showroom. He improved many of them by adding superchargers and multiple carburetors to increase their power. 6 cars reportedly got Cadillac Eldorado V8 engines with 305 horsepower, which he sold as Kaiser Darrin specials for $4,350 each. These modified cars were much faster. The supercharged versions could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 10 seconds and reach speeds over 100 miles per hour. The Cadillac-powered ones could go even faster, reaching speeds over 145 miles per hour. Some of these cars were raced in SCCA events by owners like Laura Maxine Elmer, who later married racing enthusiast Briggs Cunningham, race driver Lance Reventlow, and Ray Sinatra, Frank Sinatra's cousin. Today, the Kaiser Darrin is remembered as an interesting experiment in American sports car design. While it wasn't a commercial success, automotive historian Aaron Severson points out that many specialty sports cars of that era sold in similar numbers. The Nash Healey only sold about 500 cars between 1951 and 1954, and Allard never made more than 150 cars in a year. Even the Chevrolet Corvette struggled at first, with hundreds of unsold cars at the end of 1954. Modern collectors like Bill Smith of Mexborough still appreciate these unique cars. Smith, who saw his first Kaiser Darrin in a car encyclopedia in the 1970s, bought one from a museum in Missouri in 2021. His car, which was sold new in Pennsylvania, shows how these cars have survived through careful preservation and restoration. The Kaiser Darrin represents a special moment in American automotive history. It combined the industrial might of Henry Kaiser, the creative vision of Dutch Darrin, and the optimism of post-war America. While it couldn't save Kaiser Motors, which left the U.S. car market in 1955, the Kaiser Darrin showed that American companies could create innovative and stylish sports cars. Its sliding doors, fiberglass body, and distinctive design make it a unique part of automotive history, reminding us of a time when anything seemed possible in the American car industry.
If you enjoyed this video, then you might also want to watch some of my other videos about rare and forgotten cars. Thank you.